describes himself as a curious retail nerd. Alex Baker is the CEO and founder of Retail Tech X, and he has a passion for customer experience. He also has a mission, and that mission is to make the industry smarter and more kind.
Can you guys hear me? No? Maybe now? Yeah. Thank you, Ebba. Going out after David and Alexander and all the amazing speakers is putting me up for a challenge, to say the least. I wanted to talk to you guys. I wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about mentality, attitude, and unfortunately, I was boxed into, why don't you do this from a matrix perspective? And I was like, okay, let's try to do that. I normally speak very fast, so trying to speak fast with 30 slides will be challenging for me, but even more challenging for you. So I'm just going to kickstart. So I'm sure all of you here have seen Matrix, at least one of the 4 movies. The first 3 were amazing. The 4th one made me think, why? And I realized that there's a complete new audience for The Matrix. And if one knows about this gentleman over here, one realizes that Matrix is not just a movie. It's a set of rules and principles and theories that each and every one of us can actually extract from. And what it actually means to me, after seeing it at least 20 times, is that the more I learn, the more I realize that, oh wow, I don't know that much at all. And to some extent, the pandemic has given us this realization. So quickly, what I will talk about today, I'll go into quickly why you guys even should listen to me. I'm going to talk about this blue-red pill analogy. I'm, of course, also going to mention the framework of innovation from one of my favorite professors. I'm going to talk about how macro trends affect the lenses of innovation and why they're important to listen to. And of course, I'm going to give you guys some tools and some great examples, both from our home market here, but also from abroad. And finally, I'm going to kick you away with some key takeaways. How does that sound?
Good.
Okay, let's kick it. So I'm 35 years old. I'm extremely curious. That's the only thing you should take from that one. What has been crucial for me is that my curiosity had led me to a bunch of adventures. And the red thread in my journey is asking questions and trying to learn from everyone. I don't know if I met most of you today by serving you coffee outside. And the thing is, when I get the opportunity to speak to new people, I realize that there is a reason for why I have 1 mouth and 2 ears. So if there's something also this pandemic has given us, is the ability to actually reflect more than we do today. We developed a framework a few years ago that has been used more and more for the past few years, and many more companies, while working with innovation, realize that it's not easy just to, hire a bunch of consultants, coming in, introducing them to the methodology and the culture, and then just kick that through, because just external knowledge and external input will never change an organization. So understanding what's happening out there, understanding where we start from internally, and then just start prototyping. So we realize that more and more, this is not about technology nor knowledge, it's about mindset. I'm going to explain a little bit more. Okay, so back to the Matrix. How many of you have seen the first Matrix movie? Can we? Oh, wow. The second? Okay, good. And the third? Okay. How many of you have seen the fourth? And you that liked the fourth movie, keep your hands up. Yeah, I see like 4 hands. Okay, good, good. So one of the most interesting things about The Matrix is the subliminal, if you'd like, messages. and the lessons that we can derive from that movie. So, how many of you have a friend that you think is a very typical red pill person? Okay, let me explain first what a red pill person is. So in The Matrix, Neo is given the choice to take the blue pill or the red pill. And the red pill is the pill that actually invites him to a world that he has to question everything, that is to some extent unsafe, and that is also about to give him an experience of his life. It's not necessarily a world, or it's not necessarily an experience that means that he will find the truth, but it's the journey that might lead him to the truth. While taking the blue pill, once again, we're different as human beings. So some people want it safe. Some people want to do what they've always done because it has worked, and are not really up for challenging nor maybe innovating. The most important lessons that I take from the Matrix movie, and that I think that we all can learn from, is the ability to create new habits. And there's two really big studies, and I chose to use both numbers, so I won't be kicked down from the stage, because they're both equally true. There's been done research on both that says that either for 3 weeks consequently, if you do something, you create a habit, or 66 days. But the point with that is that innovation is a process. It's not something that these companies are innovative because they just happen to be lucky on a trend, or be lucky on a way of finding the right customer. Rather, it's a disciplined process. And we're going to come back to that while talking about Amazon. We also talk about this mindset is something that you need to bring with you all year long, every day. But the hard thing about innovation as well is that since you need to be working on this, both from an individual but also organizational level, it requires focus. And there's studies that shows that if you drop focus or lose focus, it takes you almost half an hour, more specifically 23 minutes and 45 seconds to get back on track. So this myth of multitasking, it is a myth. I promise you I will introduce you to Professor Christensen. So I was very fortunate a few years ago to study under this gentleman that passed away also, fortunately 3 years ago. He was a Harvard professor, and he launched the term of disruptive innovation back in the 90s. Many of you that have had external consultants for the past 10 years are aware of this term that at least for a few years, were one of the most used buzzwords. But what disruptive innovation actually talks about is the framework of working with innovation. And that is, one, is a process. That two, it's also a set of ideas and priorities that every organization can adapt. But it's very important not to fall for the myths of innovation. What you guys should also look up, if you find this interesting, is the job to be done concept. So the job to be done, very quickly, is a concept that he developed for Coca-Cola, for McDonald's, where in their product innovation process, they wanted to realize that why are customers leaving us, and why are customers not buying our products in the morning? They started talking to a bunch of customers and realizing that their product, i.e. their milkshake primarily, was being used not necessarily as something their customers wanted to drink or to use as a breakfast product, rather than it was a commute buddy. So while developing the next milkshake, they realized that not to make it easier to drink or tastier, but rather, how can we make it last longer? So understanding what job you as a company are solving for the customer is the key objective of the job to be done process. And the best part, it's completely agnostic, regardless of industry. The interesting thing right now, I mean, these are interesting times that we're living in, and especially now post-pandemic. I mean, as soon as we felt that we could start living again or breathing, we got into another phase, which is now the conflict in Europe. And we also have to realize that on top of the macro trends, we also have micro and fads. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So if we start with macro trends, why are they important? Because regardless of the industry we work in, we have to understand which parameters that are affecting our business. So right now, I'm sure all of you are aware of these ones. We have an inflation that will affect our business, whether we want it or not, either us as a company or directly our customers. We have a war and conflict that is obviously affecting the supply, and we also have a post-pandemic, a new normal that we're trying to somehow adapt to. And if we go back, some of you guys here, at least those of you who know Bengt, that he was amazing on, what's that game called? It was called Pokemon Go. Bengt, are you here? No, he's probably playing that still. So Pokemon Go as a phenomena was what one call a fad. So it's not a macro trend, it's not a micro trend, it's a fad, like a phenomena that comes for a short while and leave. The micro trend might be augmented reality that we're still evolving. I want to very shortly talk about this. So it's very important to understand how these different phases affects our business. And these are on an economical scale, looking into how different phases of a trend actually affects society and how long it takes to recover. And if we look on the last level of that is what we call the L shape. There it takes sometimes twice as long. So if the pandemic would have been, it's not, if the pandemic would have been an L-shape situation, it would have taken double as long for society to recover. Now, a war or a conflict is many times what they call an L conflict. What this affects, though, is when it comes to supply chain, and that is one of the biggest disruptions that sector has gone through now for the past 2-3 years during the pandemic, because a supply chain is built that each individual component in that process has to work. So that's why so many companies today have a problem with their logistics, and those who we see that have survived and had less problem than the majority are the one that has been working with something called supply networks instead. So trying to understand how can we work in a more agile way, even in a quite traditional and quite systematic model. I told you I'm going to speak fast. So we also have a bunch of technologies that affects us when it comes to physical and digital. So we live today in a world, when we talk about meta, we live today in a world where digital and physical already are interblending. So we have a bunch of different sectors like click online, buy in store. We have in-store reviews, user-generated content. We have cashier-free registration. There's a bunch of different phenomena already without us thinking of it, where we are interblending with digital and physical. And this is something that will now also increase. Amazon, of course, nobody can talk about retail innovation without mentioning this. And why is Amazon so important? Because I was asked just an hour ago, why do you want to talk about Amazon when they haven't really succeeded in Sweden? And the thing with Amazon is not that they are so good or not good in Sweden with their e-com. Amazon as a company is one of the most innovative company because they have adapted a sets of priorities and ideas that they keep pushing to test new concepts. And I mean, many of the innovations that we see within retail across the world are from Amazon. I'm going to continue. I'm going to mention some Swedish. It's very interesting, especially since Alexander spoke about TikTok. It's very interesting as well to see these new platforms and how retailers are using them. And just to mention one example that I hold very dear, you guys all aware of that Dunkin' Donuts tried to enter the Swedish markets a few years ago. It didn't work because we don't have that culture. But this American company, within that very competitive landscape, just based on TikTok, was able to thrive a business and build it up within a year to a multi-million-dollar company. So understanding these platforms is key. I also have to mention Shein, of course, and I don't know if you see this picture. So Shein, they are now valued to $100 billion, and what they do, the most interesting KPI I take from them is that they are launching 1,000 new styles every day. And compare that to the incumbents, to H&M, to Zara, who launched 2,000 new styles every month. So every second day, they are launching more than these companies. I have to mention, since we're in Gothenburg and I want to stay on stage for another 2 minutes, 3 really good examples. When we see the shift between going from product to experience, and Ebba, I know that, yes, we see that a lot of companies that actually succeed now are the one realizing that, okay, how do I take my product and actually engage and build a community with my customers? And of course, even big companies like Target, they took a lot of customer feedback and they created this white label company called All in Motion. And within the first year, they had a $1 billion sales. So understanding your customer and building a community around them is key. And I have to also mention one of my favorite examples, Shello Company, that has understand the marketplace setup. And now you find them both being quite early with live video shopping, but of course also now building a marketplace strategy. 30 seconds left, 3 slides left. So 9 key takeaways. I'm just going to choose 2 that I find interesting here. Of course, experience over product. Collapse marketplace, I'm all about ecosystem. But one thing that is interesting now as well during the pandemic, we as consumers have very low tolerance for error. So if there's something that retailers should think about is, okay, now when customers finally come to my store, how do I not screw it up? And there's no excuse. There has never been as much information available than today. So that was the key takeaways for companies. This is the key takeaways for you. I like to speak to humans. So the most important thing, forget everything you've been taught. Learn to unlearn. Learn to study new things, take new input, and finally realizing, learn to play daily. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Flowers. Learn to unlearn. Could we have another 15 minutes about that, please?
Thank you so much.
That's so interesting. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for that speedy but very insightful and interesting 15 minutes.